Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to our weekly Wednesday creativity workshop. I'm here joining you live from ISTE in Philadelphia. For those who I haven't met, my name is Clara Galan, and I lead our educator community programs here at Adobe. And today I'm excited to be joined by a very special guest and Adobe education leader, Matt Dombrowski, who's at the University of Central Florida. And I'm also joined here by my colleague, Rosie Capron. Rosie, do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, sure thing. I've met several of you, but not all of you. My name is Rosie Capron. I focus on the Adobe Certified Associate Program. I know many of you are certifying students all the time at the school, and it's such a blast hearing from you. I see Erica in the chat. I just met her in person the other day. I'm excited to be here, excited to join these calls more often. I do want to quickly give a special shout out to Matt before he begins his presentation, because Matt actually served as the client and judge at the first ACA US Championship last week in Florida. And so he just totally inspired students, blew them away by talking about his work at Limitless, and then was a really great judge in helping us pick out the best. Students had 6 hours to design materials for nonprofits. So thank you, Matt, and of course Victor, who's not on the call but was also a great judge as well.
We don't let Victor do these calls.
We'll have him on the next one, don't worry.
Good luck.
Awesome. Well, Matt, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and your background? And yeah, I'll let you take it from here, and then I'll monitor the chat in the meantime.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you all can hear me. It's really like I have every light in my office on right now, but I'm like a veil of a silhouette right now. So you just see my big hair. So my name is Matt Dombrowski. I'm a professor at the University of Central Florida, and I work with Limitless Solutions. And I see a lot of familiar names and AELs. So hi, everyone. And hope to meet all the new ones at the summit in a little over a month, under a month, which is wild. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do briefly at Limitless and kind of how motion graphics plays a role in that. And then I want to kind of talk about my passion for motion graphics, because most of you do know that I do stuff with Limitless, but don't know that I actually used to do other things that weren't teaching and weren't Limitless. So it's really exciting, and hopefully it will work, but I can hop into After Effects and show you some of my work and what I do. So I'm going to do a screen share. I don't know if my face is still on the screen at that point, but the stuff on the PowerPoint is way more important than my face. So let's do the screen share here. And
Matt, I don't think you'll be able to see the chat box while you're doing a screen share, so I'll just chime in if there's any relevant questions that come up.
Cool. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we can.
We can see blue jeans. Yep.
I'm going to just keep closing down. It's like screen inception. All right. So PowerPoint. All right. Cool. So later, when we're, how long do I have? So I do tend to go over on these things.
Yeah, so we have it till 1 o'clock, but okay. as long as you want to take, and then we'll just go from there with Q&A.
Cool. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit, like I said, to start about what I do. For those of you who don't know, as I mentioned, I work at UCF in Orlando, Florida, and my whole goal is to use digital technology now to empower underserved populations. Currently, I'm working with a few different facets of UCF, excuse me, and one of them is Limitless Solutions, and we provide 3D printed prosthetics for children, and I'll get into that as well. I'm also working with UCF Restorers, and we're doing a lot of really amazing stuff with virtual reality and helping those with PTSD and trauma, especially first responders. So kind of, taking art and providing kind of healing and help to certain communities is kind of where I'm at. I did start out with a motion graphics background, which we'll talk a little bit about later. My passion is in teaching and especially working with younger populations. So it's always my goal to kind of reach out to communities, especially here in Central Florida, and work with STEAM and STEM-based children to kind of show them the importance of that A in STEAM and how the arts can communicate and impact and empower anyone that they kind of come across. So again, empower others through creativity. I can't do this alone. So I partner a lot with engineers, artists, healthcare professionals, and everywhere in between, psychologists, you name it. And that in turn has also helped inspire me in my creative works as well, which I'll show you a little bit about. But going to Limitless real quick, because all of this kind of stems around my Limitless work. We provide 3D printed prosthetic arms for children. These prosthetics, if we're going to make prosthetics, why not do it with some flair and style? So we create crazy, fun themes around these arms, and we use 3D technology like Maya and CAD and Adobe products to kind of infuse these prosthetics with an artful expression. We do bionic arms. We also do a EMG powered wheelchair. Basically, if you flex your temporalis muscle, the wheelchair will be able to be controlled without the use of hands. So that really helps those who use wheelchairs not be dependent on a caregiver and give them a little bit more autonomy and independence. We also create training video games to teach kids how to use all these devices. And again, all of this is done through really visually creative elements in media. A few years back, Robert Downey Jr. actually gave one of our 3D printed prosthetic arms to a little boy, Alex, and that was really awesome. It was an Iron Man themed arm. If you haven't seen that video, if you Google it, it's absolutely heartwarming and really amazing. There's the arm itself. So pretty cool design and whatnot. And here's our arms in action. This is kind of a quote-unquote Transformers arm. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but let me let that load again. There we go. Cool. And through this process, it's really about communication. There's a lot of amazing labs at universities, especially in the sciences and engineering, but oftentimes they don't utilize the other resources on campus to really communicate their message and communicate to their audience. So I was fortunate enough to be approached years back by this startup group at the time, and they knew of my background in motion graphics and all sorts of stuff. So we created a lot of great motion graphics. So this is something we created in After Effects. There's some Maya in there and Premiere that I worked with them and I created. So let's see if this plays. If this music's really loud, just stop me.
FYI, Matt, I don't think the audio is actually working.
Oh, well, there's really dramatic music. So I can talk over it. That's okay. Essentially, this is to announce our clinical trials. And again, made in After Effects using 3D elements. And it really kind of showcases the power that After Effects has. And our goal is that every arm sleeve we design has kind of empowerment terms behind it. And these arms are controlled by electromyography. So when you squeeze your muscle, the arms will actually actuate and make different gestures. So our idea is that each arm can actually have different sleeve designs, and it can be as you can see, the arms here, the design can be changed out to have a unique feel and kind of message behind it. So again, a program like After Effects is so great. So using After Effects and Premiere to kind of convey the message, because there's not a lot of people out there that go looking to learn more about prosthetic limbs, unless maybe they're in the limb difference community and whatnot. So it's really important that is kind of showcased in our announcements. So that is it. Watch that again. So for us, that communication was important because we realized it's way more than kids being able to pick things up. It is so much more. This is Shahali, and Shahali is one of our few bionic adults that we've worked with, and she's a great advocate for inclusivity. She's actually a fashion model. She's wore her arm we designed for her on the New York fashion runway. and it's absolutely stunning. And she serves as a role model for kids. And it's, again, about when they wear their arm, giving them, confidence and opening the doors for positive communication. We worked with other groups such as Blue Man Group and some video game companies that I'll show you. But all of this, can't be done without communicating our message in a creative, bright, fun way. We don't want to just be another research lab. We want it to be even bigger than that. So you can see the artful designs of the arms. Again, all these are actually staged photographs, but all processed in Adobe and whatnot. This is one of my favorite ones. That's our Ferris wheel in Orlando, called the Orlando Eye. It looks over, you would think it would look over Disney. It looks over nothing. It just is kind of a bunch of farmland. It's kind of odd, but it's really pretty. We worked with Riot Games doing some sleeves like that. So if you played League of Legends or have heard of that game, one of their main characters there has limb difference. So it was important for us to build that partnership with them to create the series of sleeves. Here you can see 343 Studios. That's the Halo arm we've worked on. We worked on a few with them. We're actually showcasing a lot of our Halo arms next week. Hi. And then, like I said, we made some video games as well to teach the kids how to use the arms. So it's really all about that experience and communication through a variety of medias to create.
Es una clase en línea, pero no importa porque yo no.
Ooh, I think someone's microphone is on. I think it's
Hot mic.
Rayma, that might be you.
So here's kind of the arm in action. Every time John here squeezes at a different strength, the arm will actually create a new gesture that we programmed into that strength squeeze. So pretty neat. And we already have that. We just watched that. Again, so utilizing After Effects to get our message across has been pivotal to kind of reach out and create partnerships, and even things like the Robert Downey Jr. video was very, very important to kind of spread the message and awareness for the limb difference community. And here are some of our friends that we've worked with who are amazing people. That's Michael right there. Michael is playing one of our video games. He loves to play Fortnite, so we worked with Microsoft accessibility controllers as well to make sure that he can play that Fortnite experience. And Michael has cerebral palsy. And so it was really cool to see him being able to play with his cousins and kind of communicate through that. This is our newest game. So we have tons of commercials. My video is a little laggy. I'm sorry. There we go. So you play as an engineer, and every time that you see the character jump, the actual player is flexing their muscle. They're not using a traditional game controller. And using motion graphics even further, we worked with one of our bionic kids to create a comic book to kind of discuss his limb difference and kind of how he was confronted by a bully. And so that kind of came about, and we created the Bionic Kid comic. So what's really cool is Zachary and Cristo are two brothers in Seattle, and all the proceeds we created this comic, go back to getting another little child their arm who has limb difference. And that was all straight from Zachary and per his order. So we're really excited to work with him. Here's a little bit of the comic. Victor actually illustrated the majority of this, so we kind of mentioned him earlier today, but really awesome project. I think they've already raised a typical arm cost $1,000 for us, and a clinical trial is about $10,000 to get the kid through occupational therapy and all that good stuff. But I think they raised over almost $5,000 with selling his comic, which is unbelievable. Zach is like 9 years old, so to put that in perspective, wow, it's pretty cool. So my personal workflow to kind of lean more toward motion graphics is I combine a lot of different multimedia tools. I felt really weird putting these other logos up here. I don't know if that's allowed with Adobe Talks, but I use ZBrush and Maya as well. After Effects is my main go-to. Obviously, Photoshop, Illustrator, depending on the output, just like a lot of you use. But these are kind of my three go-tos. And that's helped me produce a lot of my personal work well before I taught. So before I got into teaching about 12 years ago, I I worked in the industry. To me, it was an amazing experience. I don't regret it for an instant, but teaching was just well more rewarding for me. I also kind of dove into the fine art world as well, using art and motion graphics to convey personal stories and personal meanings. So I worked for Jumbotrons. I did a lot of NBA Jumbotrons. I worked for Disney, a lot of being in Orlando, it's kind of a given. But Disney commercial work. So they have a lot of vacation club stuff, and they have a lot of like kind of game shows and stuff they play here in the on Disney Channel and whatnot. That I got to work on logos. This is some of my personal work that I've done in After Effects. So After Effects to me, is amazing because there's such a wide variety of outputs that you can create. So this is a pretty abstract concept here, but here this is particle emitters that I've attached physical lights using a few plugins called like Lux and Trapcode. And there's a little lag on this, so I apologize, but this piece is more on has kind of done film festivals and art galleries, but this is more about the synapses of the brain and creative ideas and the spark behind that. So all of this was created in Adobe After Effects using 3D cameras, particles, you name it, and yeah. And it kind of just loops back and forth there. Go back. This is also created in After Effects. After Effects is a very powerful tool that you can actually pull, like you saw with the ARM designs, 3D elements in. So I kind of went ahead and created like a virtual landscape and kind of a pan in After Effects. And so this is that. And these were more created as I transitioned into the professor kind of world. So, showcasing these in galleries around the world and kind of taking that typically industry stigma of motion graphics and kind of taking it more to a fine art capacity was really important to me. So motion graphics with meaning. So it's all about communication. It's just different ways of communicating, not to downplay one. These are like really jumpy. Our internet here is sometimes tricky over the summer. All right, this is my newest piece. This was composed in After Effects, and there's a lot of post-processing and layers. But this is just, I think I have 1 or 2 clips of a project that I'm showcasing in our art gallery this coming up fall. So elements were made in Autodesk Maya, 3D modeled, and a lot of the rendering and lighting were done using kind of 3D tools in different type of image-based lighting that you can do in After Effects as well. Super choppy. I do know how to work a camera. It's kind of lagging a little. And so this is kind of like a still shot of the final image, and it's basically a series of pans kind of focusing on the vanitas or the memento mori kind of aspect of it. So a lot of this can be done, again, importing 3D assets using different plugins in After Effects, image-based lighting, so taking an image and creating realistic looking light from that. So super powerful tool. Motion graphics goes kind of beyond just logos and intro sequences. So my ultimate goals, and I'm going to kind of hop into more of a demo side of things, is encourage collaboration. Obviously, we can't do this alone, so that's why the AEL community is so great to me. We have the ability to reach out to tons of different mindsets from different backgrounds and collaborate. Be proactive. There's tons of ways to do things, but finding a collaborative way is the way to go, and ultimately empower others through whatever creative means that you use. So today, getting to the point of the talk, I want to talk about like some of the basic things that I use when I do After Effects. So I'm going to go into these individually, but keep projects organized, collect your files. We'll talk about that. I want to hop into After Effects and talk about actually doing your work outside of After Effects first. Doing layout and doing a lot of commercial work, I learned soon enough that before you get thousands and thousands of different keyframes and layers and movement, and different render passes, it's really good to kind of do the majority of your layout work in programs like Photoshop or Illustrator, and then import those already organized and named into your After Effects file. Talk a little bit about easing. For those of you who've animated before, this is really basic stuff. And then talk about pre-comps, especially those who use Adobe Animate, know a lot about nesting and grouping different elements. And then finally end, which I'm not a programmer by any means, but the power that some scripts have and the ease of use that you can do that in After Effects. So let me exit out. And let's go to After Effects. It'd be ironic if my license ran out today. That would be. And we wait. So, I do teach, I should say, I do teach After Effects in my college or in the university. And one of the first things that I hear a lot is either people don't know what After Effects is and how it kind of differs from Adobe Premiere. So that's a common misconception. And I actually do a lot of my quick edits in After Effects just because I'm used to it. But After Effects typically is really powerful that you can create elements that you lay on top of video, or again, that in kind of intermingle different types of media into a final product. So lower thirds or logos or doing kind of comps in After Effects. The other thing I hear is After Effects is really complex. It can be intimidating when you first start, but if you know programs like Adobe Animate, you're familiar with obviously layers and structure from Illustrator and Photoshop, it actually becomes rather easy to kind of familiarize yourself with as you go forward. So we'll start with just kind of talking about, I guess we can talk about building files in other areas. So a lot of the work I do, again, we'll start in Photoshop. So in this case, I went ahead and created a little text effect with some layer styles as that opens. And Photoshop and After Effects and Illustrator and After Effects talk extremely well to one another. So essentially what I'll do is do my complete layout, make sure that my resolution is appropriate for whatever project I'm doing, kind of run through all my layer styles, drop shadows, bevels, you name it, all my text work in Adobe Photoshop, and then transfer that file into actually After Effects. So as soon as this boots up, I'll kind of show you what the file is and how to set it up. So. All right, it says Adobe because my students make fun of me because I'm never creative with what I write. So if I do something with masking, I'll usually just write the word mask. So save the creativity for other things. So basically what I have is a simple kind of structure of some really, really old school shadow work, just multiple layers kind of shifted backwards. We have a background with a color fill and some masking for a vignette. And I went ahead and grouped these files into folders. And that's going to play a really big role on how that comes into After Effects. So those of you not familiar with Adobe After Effects, we'll kind of talk about how it turns these layers into specific types of groups when they in After Effects and how that's organized. So we're going to kind of take this file and transfer it over. So I'm going to hop into After Effects. And the easiest way to create a new composition is obviously hit the new composition. But I'm going to double click in my project window. This project window is kind of like your library. This is where all the files live. And much like if you use Adobe Animate, all the assets will stay up there. Even though they're in the library, it doesn't mean you have to use them. I'm going to grab my Adobe PSD up here, and I want to actually import this in a very unique way. So I want to not import as footage. I don't want to flatten this. I want to actually import it as a composition. So what a composition is essentially a folder with all the layers inside of it. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's what one of my tips is, organizing your files. This kind of does it for you. So if you if you're really good at naming your files in Photoshop or Illustrator, this is going to be really easy to kind of translate to After Effects. If you're not really good in After Effects or in Photoshop naming, you can do so. So I'm going to hit open here. So composition, retain layer sizes. It's actually now asking me, oh, can you hear me okay? It's asking me if I want to keep my layer styles. So if I had a drop shadow, if I had a stroke, a pattern texture, by clicking editable layer styles, you can actually keep those functions on. So I'm going to hit OK. What it did was it gives me very organized folders. So I have an Adobe layers folder. And then this symbol right here that looks kind of like a film strip is actually a composition. A lot of people are confused about what this is. Think of this as just another type of folder that you can double click on and access the content inside. So if I double click on Adobe Text, I get basically a file with my text and my background. I can look at my timeline here and kind of see that it's set to 1:30. We can obviously change that. I have background 2 and text 1. If I double click on those, I treat them like folders. You'll see I have the individual files inside. So I have kind of that vignette that I made, and it made me a little tab up here. So it allows me to kind of go back and forth and edit things. So if I don't want it to be blue, I can simply go into the nested file and change that. My text is still here. So everything's good to go. The shadows are still in here. You can't see them, but I promise they're there. Here we go. They're down here. And we have full editable, we can edit this. There's many ways we can change it. So really important, though, to keep this all organized, because when I was in industry, I would work on files that had hundreds and hundreds of compositions, hundreds of layers. And what I typically will do is usually have an assets folder with images and video subfolders. And then so I would do like images, video, asset. And then I'd also have a folder called comps for compositions. That's this kind of thing, that kind of nested folder, and I would usually put those in there. It makes a huge difference later on, because when you collect your file, After Effects is like InDesign, it's file dependent. So everything you collect from the file needs to be in the same place when you're working on it on another computer. So when I go to my file dependencies, and I collect my files, it'll ask me to save this file, which we'll do. We'll call it AL test. We will find something to put this in. I have very few files, as you can see on my desktop. All alphabetical.
Matt, can I ask you a quick question from the chat?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff asked, did After Effects comp those groups from layer groups in Photoshop when you imported?
They did. So every folder in After Effects in Photoshop, every folder in Photoshop turns into a composition in After Effects. Now, if you're using Adobe Illustrator, it's a little different. So every sub-layer in Adobe Illustrator doesn't become a composition. It actually flattens it. So you got to be really careful with that. So if you want compositions from Illustrator or those kind of special folders, so to speak, you want to make sure that you have different layers in Illustrator. So it's slightly similar, but not the same. But yeah, it does convert that. And if you had text in After Effects, in Photoshop, when you bring it into Illustrator, After Effects, it becomes, it appears to become rasterized. But the cool thing is Adobe, and let me cancel real quick, we'll go back to this. You can actually highlight your text, and you can actually go to I don't really have text to do this with, but we can actually go to the layer effect, and we can actually take that text and turn it into rasterized text again. So if I want to take the word Adobe and edit it to AEL instead, I can select that layer, and this isn't a text layer, that's why it's not doing it, but I can actually convert that, edit it, and then it makes it vector. So After Effects works really, really well with vector, with raster, all dependent, but yeah, it's really good with converting. So I'm going to collect my files really quickly, and when I hit collect, it's going to create a folder for me, so I'll do that. And the really cool thing about that is now we have a folder with all of the appropriate PSDs. It doesn't remove it from the place it was at. It creates a duplicate. But I could give this to any of you in chat, and you'd be able to open it up in After Effects, and everything would link up. Super, super important. So naming everything is really important so you can find it. We even have a little report here that will kind of tell us different files collected, how big the file was, what plugins we used. So if I used a paid plugin, the person who opens this would look at this and go, okay, I don't have that, I need to buy it. Or different fonts used will show up in this as well. All right. So that's that. So collecting your files is super, super important. I'm going to go back to my list here. All right. So that kind of covers the first couple ones. Easing is really important as well. When my students kind of hop into After Effects, they're under the assumption that, you know, just because they move something, they're animating it, and that's really far from the case. So I'm going to actually utilize my background here. I'm going to delete the text layer, and I'm going to double click, and I'm going to import this coin. Now, this coin, whenever I bring in an asset, I always like to create its own composition. So right now, this is just a PNG, as you can see. I want to make a composition with that PNG in it. To do that, I drag it down to the composition button, located right underneath, let go, and it will create a document or a stage that's exactly sized to that asset. That's really cool. So now I have a comp, which I can drop up there, and an asset, which I can put in my images folder. So everything is nice and organized. And we'll get to the reasoning behind that in a second, but it's really good. When I was taught After Effects, I was told to make a composition out of any asset you can, because it will save you time later. And I'll show you why in a second. So going back to my tabs here, I can kind of go back to that text file, and I can drag in that newly created coin, which is going to be huge, so don't worry. I'm going to hit S for scale on my layer and scale down. And I'm going to do this, scale it, and there we go. And I'm actually going to duplicate this layer, and I have 2 coins. So easing is really important, and easing is essentially a slowing into a movement, slowing out of a movement, or the lack thereof that causes the illusion of speed changing in animation. I always equate it to my students, like if you're pulling into a parking spot, really good drivers typically like slowly pull into a parking spot, where really bad drivers just gun it and then like wreck their car. So we don't want to gun this, we want to do it smoothly. So if I go ahead and keyframe these 2 elements, I'm going to hit P for position, again, shortcut keys. I could also open my little caret here at the bottom, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch. And I'm going to do this actually on both of these. So I'm going to highlight them with Shift, hit P, there we go. And I'm going to go a few seconds in, and I'm going to move them across the screen. All right. So the way this works is when I preview this, After Effects is a little different than Premiere. It actually uses your RAM. It's a little heavier on your RAM for a RAM preview. So a lot of people don't like this. They feel like it's moving a lot slower than Premiere. What you can actually do is change your resolution. And I can actually lower this to 1/4, and you'll see it previews a lot faster. And this little green bar means it's previewing and it's playing at real time. So another cool thing is we can actually highlight our keyframes and move them to make them become faster. So I'm going to kind of move through here, hit spacebar to preview it, and now we have our race. So right now, my students typically say, okay, I have my animation, I'm done. And I tell them, no, 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 you haven't done any of the easing, any of the cushioning. Because what's really cool is the 12 principles of animation, you have timing and you have spacing. So right now, our timing is roughly, let's see, what do we have? 5 seconds. And it takes 5 seconds for both of these to get across the screen. And they essentially tie. They're reaching the endpoint at the same time. But if I go in and I make some adjustments, I can actually make them appear to be at different speeds without actually ever changing the timing. And that is what's referred to as spacing in animation. So this can be done in a couple different ways. We could simply move a keyframe to make it appear to go faster. So at this point, that top dime is winning. It's doing its thing. But if I want them to take the same time and appear differently, I can add eases. One way to do that is right-click on your keyframe, go to Keyframe Assistant, and we can go to ease in or ease out. And we can kind of play with those a little bit. And what will happen here, and I'll show you another way to do this in a second, it appears like the top dime is going to win the race, but they actually end at the same exact point. But it's giving us the illusion of different speeds, which is really amazing. After Effects gets deeper within this by using something called the graph editor. The graph editor is this little kind of notepad looking thing right here above the timeline. And when I go into the graph editor, and we'll work just with this kind of top coin here, I can actually play with curves. So I can actually separate these into X and Y. And I'm going to zoom in so you all can see this. There we go. And I can adjust basically the easing or the distribution of data. And you can see the little dots here are moving. Think of these as individual pieces of paper, or if it was like stop motion, that's where the coin would be. Move these. And now, again, it looks like that top coin's winning, but they're actually stopping at the same exact point. So using the graph editor is pivotal for elements to kind of create that illusion of movement. So pretty neat stuff. Now, why is the pre-comp important? So why was it important that I put this coin in its own composition? Well, at this point, if I wanted to change out my asset, I could simply double-click on the coin, open up that folder, and let's say maybe we don't want to change it, but maybe we want to make him, we'll do an effect on him. We want to make this guy a terrible color, purple. If I change that, now they become purple. I didn't have to apply that effect to each individual coin because that master layer had that. Even further, if I hit R for rotation, and let's say I set up a bit of a rotation in here, let's have it go, we'll make it ridiculous, we'll have it go like 5 times. Right? Now on the outer layer, these coins will rotate. And I don't have to set rotation values for each of these coins out here because inside of that folder, I've already rotated it. Actually, I'll start it earlier. And we can add eases to that, and we could kind of go into those layers. So being able to nest your layers is really, really important because it allows us to do some really cool stuff. We could even create like a fake 3D layer here, and we could mess with the orientation of the coin too. And maybe we'll have it spin. Maybe we'll put some motion blur on it. Again, make sure, I don't know if this is moving fast enough, and the more you add to it, obviously, the slower it's going to go. Right now, it's still rendering out those things. Now, I would never turn my coin sideways. It gives away the illusion of the depth, but kind of gives you an idea of what you can do in After Effects. So you can do a lot of things inside of those folders or inside of those compositions. So compositions are extraordinarily important. The other thing you can do is actually, if you have multiple files, and let's say I want to move these 2 coins together, I can actually highlight multiple layers and go to layer, precompose. Precompose will basically take those folders and put them in their own folder. And so now, if I want to move these, I can move these together. And if I want to work on them independently, I double click. It opens up that folder with the individual kind of layers inside of it. If I want to work on that coin independently again, I can click into that. And each one of those clicks gives me a little tab here on my timeline to go in and play around with. So compositions are extraordinarily important. It's always important to try to nest them in a composition. If you don't want to use it, you can always copy it and paste it outside of that if need be. So let's see. I think the last thing we had was scripting. So I'm kind of breezing over a lot of these. Scripting was something I was hesitant to until I was shown that there are tons of cool available scripts online. So if I go ahead and we're going to open a new file here. I have so many Adobe programs open. And we're going to go to our project window, double click. I have one here called Bounce. I'm giving away my effect already. Double click on Bounce, open it up. Here it is. You can see we have a layer. I have ropes, and I have like a shadow layer. We're going to just play with this text at the moment. So I'm going to turn everything but the background off. So here it is. And let's say I wanted this to come from the top and bounce. That could be a lot of work animating. Instead, what I'm going to do is maybe put, I don't know, 5 seconds or so on my timeline here. I'm going to hit P for position. I'm going to set my keyframe here. Go a little further in. Hold Shift, pull it down. It's not going to bounce. You're just going to play normally. So kind of an anticlimactic movement. And I'm going to use a script. So putting a script into After Effects, I went ahead and just Googled a inertial bounce script. And I'm going to navigate back to here where I have it. And if I go ahead and go to my text file that I created, which is called Bounce, and this is in Java or JavaScript, but it has the ability that if you know somebody who codes, they can kind of write these. This is basically going to have my movement decay like it was rubberized or it was bouncy. So I'm going to copy that script using Control-C or Command-C, and I'm going to hold my Alt key down. So when I hold my Alt key down, I'm going to click on I'm going to alter my keyframe. That's going to open up a little text pad in After Effects, and I'm going to hit Command-V and click away. That pastes that bounce. Now, inertia is based off the initial speed, so the faster I have this, the more bounce it will have. But now, I'm going to let it preview. I don't know if you all can see that on your screens, but it has some pretty cool bounce without me having to animate it. So I use scripts where there's a repetitive motion or a task that typically would take me a long time to do. Somebody's probably already figured out how to do it more effectively. So if a clock is rotating constantly, instead of setting 1,000 little keyframes, what we would use is a kind of a rotation script that would do that. We can even go in here, and if you know a little bit about this, we can actually change the amplitude, the frequency, and the decay. And just put some random numbers in. We'll put 6, click away, and then that will react slightly differently. You can see it's a little more intense now because of that frequency. We have more actions going. So those are a little bit of my favorite things in After Effects to do. There's so much more you can do with creating 3D layers. We could actually light this and put lights in here and create shadows. But I just kind of want to open it up to questions. If you have any questions about Limitless, or if you have any questions about After Effects or anything like that, feel free. So go here.
We actually just got another good question from Jeff.
Sure.
What's your favorite source? What are some of your favorite sources for scripts?
For scripts, so I love, there's Creative Cow, there's Video Copilot is a good source in general. So videocopilot.net, Andrew Kramer. I think he's speaking at Adobe Max coming up this year, so that would be awesome to meet him. He's like my hero. But Video Copilot is a great resource. Creative Cow also have scripts. Honestly, and I hate to be that person, but just Google in general. The inertial bounce script came from a Creative Cow post where it's essentially a forum-based kind of website where people just, got fed up of a repetitive task in After Effects and kind of put that there. What I found was really interesting. All of my engineer friends at Limitless they already know how to do scripting way better than I do. And so if I usually just ask them very nicely, they'll kind of go, oh, that's really easy. And they'll like run away to their corner and create this beautiful, beautiful script. But, Google and, there's every script available on Google. But yeah, Creative Cow, which isn't a fancy website, but videocopilot.net. He has his own scripts and free plugins that you can use. A lot of them I learned from these tutorials. So if you're learning or wanting to learn After Effects, these are 100% free. A lot of them come with, again, little resources like scripts and whatnot. So you can kind of see all these come with files and everything. Pretty amazing motion graphics, but yeah. So a couple of my resources. Any other questions?
Very cool. Sure, we have some other questions. It's mostly folks commenting how cool this is.
Oh, that's good. I can't see any of these comments, so I mean, people are still here. That's a good thing.
Of course, yeah. And in your class, do you give students an intro to After Effects, or do you expect them to already use it, already know how to this in the basics?
So all I expect from my students, my typical class is the first time they ever touch After Effects. They all usually have previous Photoshop knowledge, Illustrator knowledge. A lot of that, as we know, is now being taught in high school and they're certified coming in. But for whatever reason, they don't really dive into After Effects as much as they would maybe even Premiere. So they have their core classes in kind of Adobe products and they come in and, again, oftentimes they're pretty intimidated by it. But in the end, it's just a tool and it's a means to express their creativity. So some students pick it up really quick. Other students, it's not necessarily what buttons to push. There's always, like I just showed you, resources to figure that out. But I want to teach them creative problem solving and how to approach, it's almost like a puzzle, how to approach a creative problem without overcomplicating it. So they'll think, oh, I got to do 1,000 layers and I'll have to hand trace it, when there may be a quicker solution that if they just take a step back and do a lot of brainstorming, concepting, working with other students who are thinking differently than them, they typically come up with a way that they look and go, oh, that wasn't that hard at all. That was just using that script or doing something like that. So we do a lot of dissecting of pre-existing stuff. So they'll show me a commercial they saw and I kind of ruin the magic for them, but we'll go through and say, okay, this is how they did that. Or if they show me Toy Story, they'll say, well, how did they make that fence post? And I'll go, oh, they just did this. And it kind of makes it more approachable for them because all this media, it's like, oh, it's on your TV or it's on the movie screen. It's untouchable. But in fact, it's a lot of different layers of a lot of different creative problem solving.
I love that. That's a great attitude to teach students, and especially also teaching them how to use the software in a kind of smart and organized way. Because if they're in industry, they're working on someone else's dime, they're going to need to not do things the slow way. We have a couple other great questions. I'll kind of let you pick which one. Kevin asked, the top 3 mistakes made by beginners. Erica asked, what's the first assignment you give students to help them get started? And then we have some questions about Limitless as well, how it got started, how long it's been running, and whether that video is available online.
Yeah. What the mistakes the students make. So this is something kind of in terms, Rosie, that we saw at the World Championships or U.S. Championships. Students, they're brilliant, but sometimes they forget about things like their file will be like 1500 DPI, or they'll have such a large file that they're like, why does this keep crashing my computer? And they'll spend maybe 2 weeks trying to figure out how to fix their computer when the thing they just needed to make ended up being 15 times the size it should have been. So that's like probably the biggest mistake. So instead of HD, which is 1920 by 1080 pixels is typically what we use, they'll have their file be 10,000 pixels by 10,000 pixels. And so that's kind of a spiral effect. That's the number one issue that typically happens. They focus a lot on technical stuff like buttons, and then, the idea is don't worry about that. Start with a piece of paper, sketch it out. don't worry about what you can't do. We can always find a way to do that. And so that's kind of the attitude we have with those problems. So that would probably be my biggest, hurdle I have to get over with them. Also, that leads into this too, the ability to fail. I believe in failure forward learning. So all my students are like terrified that they're going to somehow get kicked out of college. And I'm not going to do that to them. But they got to realize that, it's okay to mess up. And it's okay as long as you tried to go through and do that. So that is usually a big issue in After Effects. And using their trackpad, believe it or not, on their, like I have my Mac. I was panicking because I didn't have a mouse today, but I found one. They use this trackpad and they make these little gestures, and instead of just getting a mouse, clicking and getting it done. So those are the big things for me. The second question was first project?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So first project, it depends on the group. I do things like kinetic typography, where they make like a famous quote from a movie and they can only use typography, and they kind of use that. That's pretty safe, and it gives them kind of a safety net of an audio track and a pre-existing thing to use. I've done things like, I'm really big into like cooking, and my wife will tell you this, I watch too much Food Channel and like all that stuff. But the insiders, so I want them to kind of use sequential editing to show me like how to make something, or basically just kind of do simple video editing to start, but in After Effects. So they take what they learned from Premiere and transpose that to After Effects. So that's a really good one. We do logo sequences. We do all sorts of cool stuff. It's just a matter of communication. So we always talk about what audience we're communicating for. What's the purpose in choosing the clip that they did. But the kinetic typography one typically gets them working pretty well. I'll even have them do like a 3D photograph where they separate a photograph from Photoshop in layers and then make it look like it's 3D. That's a really good starting one. And then limitless stuff. Yeah, what do you have for? I don't know how to get back to the screen I was on, but.
Well, think first, those are some really cool assignments, and I want to do them myself. I see some people in the chat are excited to use those as well. I'm curious about for Limitless, but I don't know if anyone here has some ambitious ideas similar to that they'd love to get going, possibly in collaboration with their university. Were you involved with from the beginning, or did you get pulled in after it already started?
Yeah, I joined after the Robert Downey Jr. videos. So it was about, 5-6 years ago now. A mother was on the radio. She couldn't afford a prosthetic limb for her son. They told him he could either have a hook, and this is the kid in the Iron Man video, he could have a hook, he could have a doll plastic arm that didn't move because he grew too fast, and on top of that, it could cost them $50,000. She couldn't do that. She was a waitress, and she, hardworking, but did not make that type of money, unfortunately. So she went on radio and asked, and Albert Monero, who's the president of Limitless, heard it, and he is an aerospace engineer. He wanted to work literally on spaceships, on rockets, and he said, yeah, I could figure that out. And everyone told him like, hey, it's not worth your time. And they didn't do it in a bad way, but it was not on his career path. And he said, no, I need to do this. This is the right thing to do. So they created the 3D printed prosthetic, and he got help from a lot of his friends who are some of the co-founders. And at that point, they were showcasing it and at this event, and a cameraman said, oh, my friend Robert would love to see that. They had no clue it was Robert Downey Jr. So Robert Downey Jr. Blew them all up to New York. He was a bit hesitant to play Tony Stark in that video. If you've seen the video, he's in character. But he was really excited when little Alex knew he was Robert Downey Jr., not Tony Stark, and that he was awesome. He stayed probably, they said, for hours talking to that family and playing, and just like he's really good guy. And so after that, I was approached, and that video got some viral recognition. I was emailed. I had no clue. And I say they're kids. They're not kids, the guys who run Limitless. They would yell at me if they heard that. But they're younger than I am. So I was called to a meeting, and it's these younger guys who are like PhD students staring back at me across the table, and they were asking if I could help design some of the sleeves. And I was like, yeah, we could help out. That would be awesome. And, we didn't know how big this was going to be. And I made an off comment that said, hey, you guys remember the Power Glove? And you guys all remember the Power Glove out there for Nintendo back in the day. And I said, it'd be really cool to make the arm a video game controller. And I did it not actually thinking we would do that. And they were like, yes, let's do that. So I panicked because I don't know how to make video game controllers. So I ran afterwards. I was like, yeah, we'll do it. I ran to my friend Peter, who works at UCF in game design. And I said, hey, man, can we make this? And he was like, yeah, we can do that. So luckily, he knew how to build that. I knew how to build the game side and the art side of things. And we built a team off of that. Right now, it's many years later. We've been fortunate to have these community partnerships. We are just called all 20 kids for our new trial, and they've already started designing their arms. We just printed one we're going to give out in Seattle next week to one of our kids, which is so amazing. And, we have our own lab. We have 31 undergraduate interns this summer alone from engineering, communication, healthcare, health and admin, all sorts, game design, visual art, painting. All of them are paid and funded and working there, kind of creating their own impact in the community and in the Live Difference community. So that's been pretty amazing. And we just actually had one of our engineers, Basma, just got hired at Lockheed Martin, which is awesome. In engineering, and she's only 19 years old. So she hasn't even, she's been with us for about a year. And so she went through a engineering program we have where we have them build Tony Stark's heart, like the arc reactor. And Lockheed was really impressed by that, and they hired her. So we're really impressed by where our students are going, even though we do lose them, which is kind of sad because they're awesome, but that's good they're getting out there. So it's grown a lot.
That is amazing. I'd never actually heard the origin story, so I appreciate you going into that. I do realize now it's 1 p.m. We should probably wrap up. But I want to say thank you, Matt, so much. Plenty of people, obviously, in the comments. Thank you as well, both
Thanks,
for
everyone.
just the inspirational stories, but also so many helpful tips and so many. It sounds like a lot of people are going to take some of the assignments you talked about. And
yeah, they can reach out to me. I'm on the Facebook group, and so I'm always willing to share this.
Right on. Well, thank you. And of course, we'll see you here in San Francisco next month. I know we'll see a bunch of you in the chat here next month. Those of you who we don't get to see here in San Francisco, we'll see you in the future chats. And of course, everyone, come next week for the next workshop. I'm not quite sure who's speaking. Claire could perhaps remind me. And make sure to check out the upcoming edX courses and just be in touch if you have any questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.